So, hello. Today, two brilliant persons will be joining our discussion. It's Zineb Riboua from Hudson Institute and Richard Giragosian. He's a director of Regional Studies Center from Armenia. And we will be discussing mostly the Middle Eastern issues and as well as Armenian fragile situation. I will put it this way, but maybe you will correct me, Richard, during the discussion. So I'd like us actually to start with the first question, and the question will go directly to Zineb. Since end of July, in Iran, there was a new president who assumed power, Masoud Pezeshkian, and I wonder actually how it may influence Iran's foreign policy, in generally speaking, and how it may influence Iran's stance in the region, because we know that Iranian-Israeli relations are quite strained, and we will actually talk about it even later with certain declarations from Iranian military. But generally speaking, so how may it influence, in your opinion, Zineb, Iran's foreign policy and Iran's stance in the region?
Well, thank you for having me, Denys. I would say that these presidential elections have been depicted in the media as a breakthrough in Iranian politics because it's a reformist politician. A lot of ethnically Azerbaijani Iranians voted for him, and so on. But however, I think it gives the wrong message here. The idea that there is going to be a big change because a reformist president took over is really wishful thinking. A reformist president is going to change the ways of his engagement of the West, but his goals with the West are not going to change, in the sense that for the Islamic Republic, the goal right now is to get nuclear weapons, is to empower the proxies, deepen the Iranian-Russian cooperation when it comes to drones, ballistic missiles, and cruise missiles, and most importantly, weaken the United States wherever it is in the Middle East, and we see what is happening in the Red Sea. And in fact, it happened right after he got elected. And so it's very important to emphasize that the reformist politician does not mean a reform of the Islamic Republic. It's I think very important to emphasize that Iran is engaged in a long-term conflict with the West. That's how they see it. I think it goes back to Khomeini's writings about the West as a plague and so on. And so it's and so yeah, I'm not as optimistic as other people, but I think we have to be realistic on what the Islamic Republic wants and how the IRGC has been operating.
Yeah, and you've put it rightly that when he got elected, and we have like a month later, we received the information that Iran will be sending the ballistic missiles to Russia to bomb Ukraine. So, I mean, it somehow confirms basically what you're saying right now. And Richard, do you want to comment something on this, or you would prefer me to jump on the question regarding Armenia?
Well, I'd like to actually second Zineb's analysis. And specifically, this new president, Zineb is quite correct. He would not be considered a reformist in any way. Moreover, the president of the Islamic Republic of Iran is very much prisoner of the system that he is supposedly running. In other words, it's not enough for any one individual, including a president, to actually significantly change or alter the Iranian system itself.
I understand. So let me kick in with the question for you, and the question is quite basic, I guess, but it's quite interesting nevertheless. After the second Nagorno-Karabakh war, Armenia seems to be, like, I would say, drifting away from the Russian sphere of influence, and I was delighted to meet you in Yerevan end of August and to discuss a bit the regional trends with you. So how could you describe actually the Pashinyan's approach to this policy? Because I guess given the Armenian fragile military situation, economic situation, how can he navigate actually this drifting away from the Russian sphere of influence?
Well, let's start with the broader picture, the broader context. Russia remains overwhelmed and distracted by its failed invasion of Ukraine. Russia's power and position in this region is actually based on insecurity, not confidence. It's based on weakness, not strength. And in that context, there's both an opening and an opportunity for Armenia to reassert its independence and defend its sovereignty. The second factor of this relationship is Armenia's coming to power in 2018 of a genuinely democratic government was an inherent threat to Russia. And in this context, tension with Russia was inevitable. But much of Russia's arrogance, taking Armenia for granted, was the real driver for the distancing and divergence of Armenia's previous reliance on Russia. And the third factor, I would say, is a belated recognition in Armenia that Russia is a dangerously unreliable so-called partner. Therefore, it's a pivot to the West. It's also a diversification of security partners, including most notably India. Now, finally, on Armenia-Russia, the analytical question is what we do now. Is it too little, too late? Given years of Armenia's previous mortgaging of its independence to Russia, in terms of we are a member of Putin's prison, the Eurasian Economic Union, or the Collective Security Treaty Organization. So much more needs to be done, but Armenia is on the right trajectory.
Yes, and I would note actually, since I was a bit surprised when I knew this information, and you have confirmed it, that the Russian, let's say, hand on the Armenian airport, the security control has been finally lifted, and the Russians, they left the airport, and there is no longer Russian FSB guys present checking the passports of foreign nationals and Armenians. And I guess it is one of the indicator of Armenia is drifting really away from Russia, and that the Pashinyan's government is serious. Am I correct?
Well, I would add one explanation. This is the most obvious demonstrable victory in Armenia standing up for itself with Russia. Russia was forced to agree to withdraw border guards from the airport and also to pull out border guards along the Armenian-Azerbaijani border. Much more needs to be done, but this was a very public victory of Armenia's defense of its independence.
I see. So, Zineb, if you want to jump in and add something, be my guest. If not, we will go with another question.
No, sure. I just think that it's interesting how Russia has been leveraging on its invasion in Ukraine to promote itself, especially in North Africa and so on, where it had a huge success, but yet it is very much struggling, as Richard pointed out, in the South Caucasus. And that it's actually, we should welcome these news that Armenia is trying to get rid of Russia as a patron of its national security and security issues. So I think this is an important development. It will obviously also piss off Iran, as Iran has been using its proximity to Armenia to actually bother the Azerbaijanis when it comes to their deals with, for example, with Israel or with their cooperation with Europe. So I think, yeah, it's a very important development.
Listen, in recent weeks, and we've been observing it, this growing warmongering coming from Tehran. So in recent weeks, different Iranian military officials actually have voiced this warmongering messaging regarding Israel. And since we know the relations are really, really strained between the two states, and the whole region is quite even more far away from peace than maybe 2 years ago. And I actually wonder, how would you assess? Should we be worrying, or it's only some merely rhetoric? How far Tehran actually may go in escalating?
So I would say that Iran has already been escalating since last year, in fact. And to me, this is, for example, I would just say right after the assassination of Haniyeh, everyone was saying that Iran is going to attack, Iran is going to attack. Israel said it, United States said it, but it's based on intel reports that basically Iran has increased its posturing, which was true. However, at the time, I also told my colleagues that I don't think Iran is going to attack right now. First of all, because they don't have nuclear weapons to launch a direct attack. I think that this is what they are working towards, and I think Blinken and also Jake Sullivan, they also said that that Iran is increasing its enrichment program. It's very hard even to know where they are at right now, as the IAEA cannot inspect properly. And so my assessment personally is that I don't see Iran attacking directly unless they have immense security guarantees, and that nuclear weapons would give them. However, I do think that they are seizing every single opportunity to weaken Israel's posture, because what Israel is doing right now is to restore deterrence against Iran. It's engaged in multiple fronts. It's not just Gaza, it's also Lebanon, it's also Syria. It's also Iraq, through which Iranian proxies are launching drones, and also Yemen, where the Houthis, through ballistic missiles and so on, have threatened Israel directly. And so I think that for Iran, the goal is to show that it is weakening US allies, because even the Saudis now have been trapped and cannot really respond as they used to. And so there is this military side, but there is the political side. The assassination of Haniyeh, even if it was like such an embarrassment for the Islamic Republic because it happens inside Iran and so on, it actually kind of helped them in a way that Sinwar is now the head of Hamas. Sinwar has direct ties with Iran. He is 100% aligned with what Iran wants when it comes to reigning over Gaza, when it comes to their anti-Israel agenda. And so they see it as still of a win because politically they can still use him. The other thing I would say is that they are also betting on US policy, which has not been of countering Iran directly. I mean, the fact that the Red Sea has been blocked since last year, and that the United States is still struggling with it, for Iran is still a win. And it's important to remember that since the death of Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian slogan was to get the United States out of the Middle East. And this is for them itself a huge success. So it's important, I think, to take into consideration their political goals when discussing this whole thing, because it might not be as clear, but I do expect them to escalate through their proxies. I just don't think that they are going to attack directly.
Understand. And Richard, I know that you're not only expert on Armenia and the region, but you also have knowledge on the broader regional affairs. Maybe you could also comment on this question briefly?
Well, I agree with Zineb. Let me simply add that Iran militarily lacks the capability or the capacity for a direct assault or attack on Israel. Moreover, the Iranian regime is being very calculated and cautious. Instead of a direct attack, it's focusing on two other areas. One is empowering, enabling their proxy forces beyond the Middle East in terms of, in Iraq, using the financial network for financing, in Syria, Lebanon, Yemen. But the second area is more interesting. In other words, enabling and empowering their proxies is both natural and expected. What's different this time is a second area or theater of operations where Iran is also targeting Israel's partners. In this context, Azerbaijan, which has not just a relationship with Israel, between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Aliyev of Azerbaijan, a very close relationship that defies Turkey, which is Azerbaijan's traditional partner. And the reason I'm so asserting this is in recent days, we saw the delivery of over 200 ballistic missiles from Iran to a Russian port in the Caspian Sea, which was a message to Azerbaijan. And as of yesterday, the Iranian military has begun preparation for a large military exercise along their border with Azerbaijan. So this is not a direct attack against either Israeli or Western interests, but a dangerous escalation in the use of proxy forces.
And actually, I would also like to ask you, and ask you both, by the way, the question. Recently, Turkey and Azerbaijan, they have voiced their desire to join the BRICS Union. And President Putin was in Baku just a few days ago, like a week ago, I guess, at the beginning of month of September. And I wonder, how actually could this change the regional balance of power? What does it may mean? Because somehow Turkey and Azerbaijan, they were very closely related, and Turkey played on both plates. For example, in the conflict of Russia-Ukraine, Turkey, at least at the beginning of the war, played a role of tried to play a role of some kind of a middleman, between Putin and Zelensky. But this alignment, this bid to join BRICS, how this may change the regional balance of power, in your opinion?
Zineb, do you want to go first?
Sure. I would say that it's not an alignment. It's not an alignment at all. From Washington, it's really seen as Turkey and Azerbaijan hedging their bets. It's been 2 years since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The Biden administration has been dragging its feet when it comes to helping Ukraine, supporting Ukraine, giving it more weapons, especially when it needed them. So for Turkey, it's really a signal that the Russians are going to be trapped next to them, especially when it comes to Black Sea posture. It's especially important for Turkey since they are dealing with Russia, not just in Eastern Europe, but they're dealing with Russia also in Syria, in Libya. And they see even Russian interference in Iraq. And so I think for Turkey, they are very much aware of Russia's presence in the Eastern Mediterranean. They are afraid that, for example, after U.S. elections or so on, there would be a deal, for example, and they will have to deal with the Russians. So I think they're just diversifying, I would say, their risks. And I think it's the same thing for Azerbaijan, especially that both countries work together. And it's important also to mention that Azerbaijan, with the help of Morocco, has been also expanding in North Africa when it comes to their deals, and also they've been exploring just more areas of cooperation. And everyone knows that now, if you want to go into Africa, to North Africa, you will see Russians. And I think this is very important to mention that in the grand scheme of things, in the grand chessboard, that Russia is in multiple areas of interest to both countries, and that joining the BRICS is not really an alignment. It's more of U.S. allies and NATO and a NATO country seeing that since not much progress is going to be made in critical areas, then they will have to reach a certain agreement, and that they would like for the door to remain open. But that's how I see it personally.
And Richard, do you agree, or do you have another opinion?
No, actually, I'm equally skeptical. And what I'm talking about is BRICS is yet another opportunity. But most of these attempts we've seen at regional trade organization, alternative trade, have always been nice potential, distressing or disappointing reality. For BRICS, Armenia has also countered this effort by now announcing that the Prime Minister of Armenia next month will reach out and attend the BRICS summit. And Armenian relations with India and Brazil are helping to drive that. Nevertheless, BRICS is more about the negative than the positive. In other words, the BRICS alignment is negating and challenging the West. And in this context, it's reminiscent of the non-alignment movement from history. And in some ways, it's about a third way. where even Russia will not necessarily be the driving force for BRICS. And as Zineb has pointed out, even Russian activity in Africa has been bilateral between Moscow and the various countries and capitals.
I understand. And by the way, interesting thing also that Turkey just said recently that the European Union wanted to get closer to Turkey and to somehow revive the relations. So I guess it aligns with what you're saying both. So Zineb, another question I have for you, it's actually the upcoming presidential election in the United States. And I guess if, even though we mostly ruled out any serious escalation coming from Iran regarding Israel, but anyhow, if there is something happening, there is an escalation, how, in your opinion, the United States may react, given that there will be in next month, there will be in a turbulent situation given the domestic agenda and the elections?
I would say that I do not think that the Biden administration will escalate. I think it's been a clear message since they came into office that all they want is a peaceful Middle East. Even Jake Sullivan, when he wrote his piece in Foreign Affairs, he was praising the regional integration program that they were and strategy that they were pushing, which is basically to have Iran as an integral part of the Middle East. And when it comes to nuclear weapons and so on, all that is needed is diplomacy. But of course, it didn't work out. And despite the fact that it did not work, they kept on doubling down. And this is why it gives the results we see today. I do not think that we will see a high escalation, or even if an attack happens, I think we'll continue to see the same trend. However, if there is a change in the elections, and for example, the Trump administration comes to office, I think that's where everything is going to shift. I think the maximum pressure campaign is going to be even more I would say aggressive than before, just because Iran has been using all these loopholes when it comes to sanctions. For example, China still buys oil from Iran, which actually helps Iran in funding its various military industrial complex programs, funding its proxies. So we will see a huge change. But from the Biden administration, I do not think so. I believe that they still believe in diplomacy and reaching out and so on. And it's even more important to mention that there was just recently a withdrawal from Iraq, which and Iraq is still actually fragile when it comes to Iranian proxies. So yes, I think it's the same trend. And yes, I believe that even for the Harris administration, if it wins, I think they will continue the same policy.
Okay, I understand. And do you have any opinion on this, Richard?
Yes, mainly because I do expect the real test of a change in policy to come in February or March. In other words, well after the inauguration, it will take several weeks to a month before any repercussions from US policy take effect. But I'm not objective. I'm a Democrat, having served for 10 years as staff in the United States Senate. I fear the possibility of a Trump administration, and I think Trump and only Trump would actually signal a dangerous degree of volatility, unconventional and unpredictable behavior regarding Iran. But I really think this bears concern. But more than what Zineb has pointed out, we really shouldn't expect anything to change in the short term.
I understand. And going back to the Russian influence, actually, that we have touched upon, paradoxically, in Armenia, the Russian influence is slowly but is fading away. And at the same time, we see that the Russian influence in Georgia, that had a war with Russia in 2008, and in Azerbaijan, Russian influence is somehow increasing. How could you explain this? What are the drivers behind it?
All right, let me take this first, if I may, Zineb. In terms of the Russian position, I would say developments in Georgia are very, very worrisome. Georgia, unfortunately, has lost much of its achievements in democratization and is going in the wrong direction. It is also looking to improve and deepen relations with Moscow. From an Armenian perspective, this is very much a challenge. As Georgia moves away from the West, embracing Russia, it leaves Armenia more isolated and vulnerable, and hence the concern. In Azerbaijan, I do give credit to the Azerbaijani leadership for doing a very good job at challenging Russia, defying Russian, humiliating the Russian peacekeepers that were in Nagorno-Karabakh, for example. But I do think the outlook for Azerbaijan is very dangerous. Over the long term, we see an inherent conflict between rival Turkish-backed and Russian-backed factions within Azerbaijan. So I do think that although Russia's position now is weak, we could also say that there's a storm on the horizon, where no matter what happens in Ukraine, we do expect an angry, vengeful Russia lashing out at all of her neighbors in the near abroad.
And do you have something to add, Zineb?
No, I think for Russia the goal is really right now damage control in the South Caucasus. The fact that they are no longer as strongly part of negotiations, part of the roundtables, is actually very embarrassing for Russia. And so I think that they are still preparing either to leverage on every single win they get to get back on their involvement. And so whenever it's disinformation campaigns and so on, it's really, I think, damage control, especially for this region, for the area. But elsewhere, it's more of a weapon. So I think that's how I've been reading it personally.
I see. And actually, I will have a follow-up question to you because I know that you're following pretty closely the Northern Africa. And just recently, there was the re-election of the president of Algeria. And actually, we know that the Russian, and basically prior to this, it was Soviet influence, and the ties between Algeria and Soviet Union, then with Russia, were always pretty much strong. How could you maybe evaluate or assess the current policies of Algeria regarding Russia? And we know that there was this huge debacle, I would say, of the Russian Wagnerites in the northern part of Mali, this Azawad movement. How could you assess it? I know we are jumping from one region to another, but actually just today I've read the news about the new president in Algeria. That's why it came up.
Yeah, the new president elected with 95% of votes. Yes, it's such a shame because Algeria has so much potential when it comes to being actually a real regional power in the region. They have a lot of oil, they have a lot of resources, they have a human capital that is capable of many things. And yet, because the regime is basically a military junta, they've been since the start, I think, doing as much as they can to collaborate with Russia. First of all, because they see their neighbor Morocco as a rival. They want to have access to the Atlantic Ocean. And so what they've done was, through the years, empower the Polisario Front, which acts as a proxy, to demand access to the Western Sahara and therefore to the Atlantic Ocean. They have been also an enormous problem when it comes to counterterrorism. Al-Qaeda is still operating in the Sahel. Algeria does not do much when it comes to collaboration. It's been a disaster, for example, for Mali, for Niger, and other neighbors. And it's important to also point out that for Russia, Algeria is a very important partner when it comes to natural gas. So this is why I wrote, I think, 2 years ago about Europe's Algeria problem, because, for example, in Europe, there's this thinking that, okay, we'll stop getting Russian natural gas, we'll get from North African countries, and we'll go to Algeria. But actually, they are going to another Russian satellite, which is as risky. And it's a huge problem that Algeria is still committed to promoting Russian interests in the region. They are putting in danger not just, for example, Libya, as you know, with the shared borders. Libya is trying to maintain its national sovereignty, to have a government, etc. But Algeria has been sabotaging a lot of these efforts, and so it's problematic, I would say, especially, for example, for Mediterranean security when it comes to collaboration on immigration and so on. I think Algeria is just important to watch because North Africa is basically in flames right now because of all the, as you pointed out, the Azawad movement fighting Wagner mercenaries. The Sudan is having a huge impact on the region because of how the civil war is changing the whole landscape, as there are so many refugees from Sudan now going to Libya, going to Chad and other places. And so it's interesting because I do think that this is exactly what Putin wanted. He didn't send Wagner mercenaries just to have fun and get into gold mining in the Sahel. No, they went there because there is a strategic goal, which is to weaken NATO's southern neighborhoods. As much as the NATO Eastern Front is important, NATO's southern flank is also important. And overwhelming Europeans with these issues when it comes to terrorism, to migration, to collaboration with North African countries when it comes to natural gas and so on, keeping them distracted as much as possible it also plays into Russian interests.
And if I may, Zineb, I will actually follow up with a short question because Frenchman, I couldn't not to ask you, about this summer's declaration coming from Paris regarding the Sahara issue. And yes, and so maybe you could tell us a few words actually how those decisions, those comments and declarations were met in Morocco.
Oh, sure. I actually, since the start, a lot of people I know were very skeptical of France supporting Morocco's sovereignty over the Western Sahara. But my position has always been that France is an important partner. It's geographically, we are doomed to collaborate, even if the other side, even if Moroccans do not want to, even if the French do not want to. I think we have a long history of good friendship, of collaboration, even after the protectorate. So I think I've always been optimistic about French-Moroccan ties. And I saw and because the United States recognized Morocco's sovereignty over the Western Sahara, the Germans followed. Spain, which was the main actually issue in the whole file, followed up on it, and it was only a matter of time for the French to follow, mainly because for France it's also part of their interest to collaborate with Morocco, as I mentioned, the Morocco's geostrategical location and also rising power in West Africa is very attractive, for example, for Russian business, for French businesses and for France's interests. So it was. I think they saw it as a very positive thing, but everyone also knew that because France did this move, they are going to pay for it. Because I think Algeria was very unhappy and showed it. So yeah, it will be. I think it's a game changer for the region.
So we can say that the Western Europeans, they have chosen their side.
Yes.
Richard, do you have something to comment regarding the Russian influence, for example, in Northern Africa, in Mali, the Wagner operations, the use of proxies?
I do not. Instead, I have a comment following Zineb on the Maghreb. In terms of adding just two additional points, in terms of the broader Maghreb region, I see Morocco increasingly ever before becoming the center of gravity for stability. And at the same time, I think King Mohammed of Morocco has been fairly successful in quiet diplomatic efforts regarding countering the Polisario, dealing with the Western Sahara. I give less credit to France and more to Spain, however. It was actually the Spanish decision that was much more the turning point. And at the same time, France is quite, I think, satisfied with angering the Algerians. Because to add something about Algeria, I'm really disappointed that years or even decades of the previous mummified president of Algeria has been replaced not by democracy, but by a strong man. And what's important for the real test for the future of Algeria is the best and the brightest don't live in Algeria. They live in France largely. And there's far too little opportunity for the youth and for the best and brightest to return to build Algeria. This is also why I'm pretty convinced it's Morocco that's going to be the center of gravity for years to come.
I understand. And actually, yet again, talking about France, and we've been delivering to Armenia some weapons, if I'm not mistaken, Griffon APCs and the famous César howitzers. How was it, first of all, how was it welcomed in Yerevan? And second, how it may change, because in my opinion, but I will not voice it here because I want you to talk, not me. How it may change the defense capabilities of Armenia regarding this fragile environment Armenia is, because just recently, after coming from Yerevan, I heard some comments regarding this issue, and let's say Turks and Azeris are not really happy that we are helping, even though at a very small pace, Armenia.
Well, obviously, the French military assistance is very welcomed, very valuable, specifically because it's defensive only. It's in terms of anti-tank, as well as artillery and air defense, designed to strengthen Armenia's territorial integrity. It's not about any offensive capability. But actually, Armenia has one other procurement deal that was much bigger, and that was with India. Similarly, defensive weapons, with the idea in Armenia, in this post-war period of adaptation, we're looking to de-escalate and climb down. Moreover, it's a transformation in defense to a territorial defense rather than trying to seize territory. But I do think, if we're honest, the French president who's driving this French policy is actually more pro-Armenian than the Armenians. And that's not always helpful, because this is very much about Macron's ego, his bid for leadership on the European stage after the retirement of Angela Merkel. And I do think now, with the fairly recent elections in France, Macron's in a weaker position than before. So I do count on France to continue support, but I think it's the EU engagement that's much more important for Armenia, including the deployment of an EU monitoring mission to Armenia and the first ever security assistance from Brussels.
That's true. There was a package. It was what, 5 million US, 5 million euros, I guess, or I'm mistaken. I guess it was something like this.
10
yeah.
million.
I have actually two more questions for you all to finalize our discussion. And the one question is regarding the recent visit of Egypt's President Sisi to Turkey. It was, I guess, the first visit of an Egyptian leader to Turkey since like 12 years, I guess. What are we assisting to right now? What is happening actually? Why did Erdogan decided to normalize relations with Egypt?
I would say for a very simple reason. Things in East Africa are heating up. Egypt has a huge issue. First of all, its economy is struggling. Its military is under huge pressure, mainly because of Libya and also because of Sudan. Turkey has the advantage of having a military base in Somalia, and Egypt sees Somalia as an ally, I guess, against Ethiopia, mainly because Ethiopia is building the Grand Renaissance Dam, as they call it. And for Egypt, it is a huge threat to their interests, ranging from military to economy to agriculture. There are different sides to it and different layers. And so I do think that here Turkey sees an opportunity to reach out to Egypt when it comes to backing its interests and so on. And I think it's even more important for Turkey because I do think that Turkey's posture in the region, its relationship with Sudan, its relationship with Egypt, its relationship with its military engagement in Libya is actually a direct challenge for Iranian and Russian interference in that region. I do think that this is how they've been seeing it, that it's a great power competition, a regional competition, and that Turkey has an advantage it needs to use before it's too late. And more importantly, unlike any other stances, this time Sisi is under so much pressure that he is open. And so for Turkey, it's very important, especially since Russians are operating in Syria. It's very important for Turkey to have a dominance, or at least have a good posture in the Eastern Mediterranean. I do think that it's actually a good sign for Egypt to have at least a partner when it comes to defending its interests. However, what I'm very concerned with is that the conflict with Ethiopia and Somalia and Egypt will escalate to the point where it will affect Red Sea security. And this is something that I think Turkey is very aware of. And if they can play a role of a mediator, that would be a good thing. I'm just not as optimistic in regard to that.
Yeah, the difficult situation in the Mediterranean Sea that could be even more difficult. I don't know to what point, but with the Eilat port already dead, I mean, without basically any cargo coming there or coming out of there. Anyways, and Richard, could you please give us your thoughts?
Well, yes. In other words, I see it a little bit differently. I see the Turkish move less about Egypt alone and more about Israel and Gaza. At the same time, it's also a Turkish success in beating Russia to the punch regarding Egypt. It's also a counter by Turkey to the developments between Cyprus and Egypt. But I think from my point of view in Armenia, this is an opportunity because for Turkey, normalization with Egypt also creates an environment more conducive for Armenia-Turkey normalization.
I understand. And I guess we are reaching to our last question. It's a very general question, but the issue that media are starting to talk about again, it's the possible negotiations between Russia and Ukraine, and India that is positioning itself as a possible peace broker, with the Indian National Security Advisor going to Moscow recently after the visit of Modi to Kiev and to Moscow. In your opinion, will India achieve something? Because personally, I don't really believe in a peace that is nearby. I maybe in 2025, maybe they would reach some kind of ceasefire or something like this. But in your opinion, will this mission be successful? What can be achieved? How India can actually broker this peace and what it may bring to India?
If I could say very quickly that I know that India, for example, after it saw the normalization between Iran and Saudi Arabia, they thought that actually they could have done it, and that China because India has a good relationship with Iran, and also they have a very good relationship with Saudi Arabia. So it was a win for China, and because this is something from what I've heard from from several Indian analysts that they felt that it was taken, that China took advantage of that, and that they could have easily done it. And I think it's the same mindset. There's a wave reconciliation project that China is underdoing, and that maybe India is trying to counter that and show that India can also broker deals and reach agreements. So I think this is how they've been seeing it. Whether it will be implemented or not, will be a ceasefire deal is going to be done or not, I quite honestly cannot really tell.
And you, Richard?
Well, I would add that in terms of Indian engagement, Ukraine is actually problematic. It's an overreach. It's not realistic, largely because India is not fully accepted as a real broker or mediator here. Moreover, I think the Indian engagement has been very successful in only two areas: getting frequent flyer miles from traveling and staying in a nice hotel, perhaps. Other than that, I don't see any returns from this Indian effort. And I agree with Zineb. This is a calculation more to offset China.
Listen, thank you very much for your quite interesting and honest answers to my questions. And thank you for this beautiful discussion.